Okay, welcome back. We're on chapter 16, the monetary system. Let me tell you a few things of what this lecture video is going to be and a few things that it's not going to be. It's not going to be a replacement for the reading. It never is, and certainly not a replacement for the much more comprehensive PowerPoint video lectures that I already offer my voiceover PowerPoint slides. This chapter is about money. And there are a lot of terms. I'm going to very briefly go over a few of these terms, but it's definitely not going to be comprehensive. So it won't replace the reading. It won't replace the normal PowerPoint video lecture with my voice over it. So make sure you're taking care of that material as well. So what is money? It's a set of assets in an economy that people regularly use to buy goods and services from other people. It has three functions. It's a medium of exchange, which is an item that buyers give to sellers when they want to purchase goods and services. That's the first function of money. It's literally the go-between, the universally acknowledged form of currency. The second function of money is it is a unit of account. It's basically a yardstick. It literally says in the definition. I love it. People use to post prices and record debts. Hey man, you owe me 20 bucks. Okay. Hey man, you owe me 200 bucks. That's a different story than 20 bucks. So it's a measure of how much you owe me, or this t-shirt's 10 bucks. This t-shirt's 100 bucks. That has different connotations in the economy. So it's a unit of account. It's also a store of value. That's an item that people can use to transfer purchasing power from the present to the future. Basically, you can store money, earn interest on it, as we talked about in the previous chapters, and it increases in value if you can get more interest than, say, inflation. So again, money has three functions. It's a medium of exchange, a unit of account, a store of value. Very briefly, we talk about liquidity. Liquidity is the ease with which an asset can be converted into the economy's medium of exchange. For example, nothing's more liquid than cash money. A check is a little less liquid than cash money, but you can write one and people will take it and then get their money. But the further you get away from actual cash money, so a car is less liquid than a check because you have to sell the car and then collect the money. It takes time to sell the car. A house is less liquid than a car because it takes longer to sell a house in general than it would a car. So a car is more liquid, so on and so forth. So liquidity is how fast something can be converted to cash. If you're very liquid, you have a lot of cash on hand. Commodity money rather versus fiat money. Commodity money is money that takes the form of a commodity with intrinsic value. For example, once upon a time, the U.S. was on the gold standard. Turn of the century, basically right around World War I into like World War II, when we kind of finalized it. We went away from commodity money, where our money wasn't backed by gold or silver. We weren't on a gold standard anymore. We became what's known as fiat money. Fiat money is money without intrinsic value. It's used as money by the government decree. So if you look at a dollar bill now, it doesn't say, hey, one silver note or backed by the gold. It says backed by the U.S. government. So fiat money is only valuable to the extent that the government is credible. So if you have money that's backed by the U.S. government, it's generally considered to be credible because it's ultimately backed by your confidence in one of the world's largest economies. So currency, as defined, is all the paper bills and coins in the hands of the public. So currency is what's in circulation. Demand deposits or balances in bank accounts that depositors can access on demand. So that's money you put into the bank. And it says by writing a check, but they should edit that and say, hey, also writing a debit card. A debit card is a check card. So not a credit card, though. That's not money. That's debt. We work within a Federal Reserve System. There's advantages and disadvantages. I'll let you read about that in the reading, and also the Federal Reserve's organization. It's a central bank. It's the central bank of the United States. The Federal Reserve is commonly called the Fed. So you'll hear that. Hey, the Fed raised or lowered interest rates today. The central bank is an institution designed to oversee the banking system and regulate the quantity of money in the economy. So the Fed basically says, hey, banks have to hold back this much in reserves. Or the Fed says, hey, we're going to sell government bonds at this type of return. Well, if you take money out of the economy and buy a government bond, that's money coming out of the economy. Conversely, if you sold bonds, excuse me, if you bought bonds, you're taking money into the economy and bringing bonds out. So if it's helpful, I always like to refer to the money supply, as a lake level. There are controls that can affect the level of a lake. You can let some water out, you can hold some water in, and you can really change the amount of supply. There's no difference with that than the regular monetary system in the United States. You can control the supply. Central bank is well central to that. They have a board of governors that makes a lot of decisions in terms of interest rates. Interest rates, the price you get to save is the price you pay to borrow money. We're talking about saving here. If you raise interest rates, more people are going to save. If they save, that means they're not spending. Economy slows down a little bit. If people are saving, though, eventually they can invest, which helps GDP that way as well. We tend to lean the other way and kind of ease the quantity of money out there, and that's actually called quantitative easing. Quantitative number easing means make more available. So that affects the money supply. It's the quantity of money available in the economy is the money supply. The monetary policy is the setting of the money supply by the policymakers in the central bank. So you have policy that sets what the money supply is. You have policy that determines where our monetary lake level is. So generally speaking, in a growing economy, the lake level, the level of supply of money tends to be higher, because you want to kind of stoke that fire, keep feeding coal into the fire. So conversely, it's kind of a catch-22. When there's a downturn in the economy, you kind of want to spark it, give it a little kick. We're recording this in the spring of 2020. We're going through the COVID pandemic, so watch lectures being done at home. And the federal government's in the midst of sending out $1,200 checks to everyone. So that's a little kick to the economy. That gets you money in your account, gives you a little bit of peace of mind, but also gives you some money to spend. And as soon as we do, stop with the shutdown, people go out and spend some of that money. So it's kind of a catch up for the economy, if you will. So they're looking to ease the burden on the American consumer, yes, but they're also looking to help small business owners, which employ 90% of the economy. So if you have more money in your pocket, you tend to spend more. Banks can hold reserves, and the point of this lecture is basically to talk about banks and their reserves. Banks' reserves are deposits that banks have received but have not loaned out. How do banks make money? Okay, banks make money by bringing in money in the form of savings. So let's say there's 30 of us in a classroom. 5 of us have plenty of money to save. We put it in the bank. Actually, let's say it's more than that. Let's say 20 of us have plenty of money to put in the bank. We put it in the bank, and we expect some interest back for leaving it at the bank. And now what does the bank do? They just sit there and let it collect dust? Absolutely not. How banks make money is they pay you one interest rate, and then they find 10 applicants for a loan. They give loans to 5 of them because they're high chance of paying them back. So 5 of them get a loan, and they charge them a higher interest rate to borrow money, because interest rate is the price you get to save money. It's also the price you pay to spend money you wouldn't otherwise have. So that are people who have saved up, can make a deposit, have good credit, they're eligible to take out a loan, pay a higher interest rate. So let's say you're, as a saver, get 3%, and as a borrower, those 5 that come in, the 20 get the 3% on, like, say, $100,000, and the 6 come in and borrow that $100,000 collectively. They pay 6%, that 3% in between. So savers get 3, borrowers pay 6. This in between, right here, 6 and 3, bank gets to keep. That's how they make their money. Banking's so competitive nowadays, it's rarely on fees anymore. Used to be back in the day there was more money to be made on fees, but really they make all their money now at loaning at this rate, paying savers at this rate. Savers get their money, loaners get their borrowing and their borrowers, and then the bank gets to keep all this. So that's how banks make money. It's really not that complicated. We work in a fractional reserve banking system. What does that mean? It's a banking system in which banks hold only a fraction of the deposits of reserves. Why? Well, the Federal Reserve wants banks to hold a certain amount of money in the vault, but they realize if banks are making loans People are investing. If people are investing, they're opening businesses. They're opening businesses. They're hiring people. If they're hiring people, people are earning money. People are earning money. They can pay taxes. They can pay taxes. They can pay for the federal government. So that's the relationship there. That said, the Fed can serve, they do the lake levels, right, up and down in terms of the money to supply and the impact on the economy. Well, one of those controls that they have is the reserve ratios, the fraction of deposits that banks must hold in reserves. Okay, so it's the amount of money that legally the monetary policy set by the Fed, they require banks to have, say, 10%. So if you brought in $100,000, the bank legally, and the reserve ratio was 10% set by the Fed, the bank legally could loan out $90,000. So that's the fractional part. They have a fraction of their reserves. So the idea is allow them to make money, allow businesses to make investments. Those investments are paid back plus interest. The bank pays the savers. That's why there are restrictions on if you put money in a certain savings account, you can't just come back the next day and demand it all back. That's how the fractional reserve banking system works. And the hope is that all this investment gets GDP rolling. Okay, and we've talked about that before as well. So that's a great launching point for what I wanted to talk about today on the board behind me. All right, pardon me, moving the camera here. Let's take a look. We're going to do about 6 different things here, but they're all going to flow together. Okay, I am really hoping you guys can read that. It always looks remarkably better than I anticipate after I see it. So let's hope that's the case right now. So where are we at? Well, we're talking specifically about the money multiplier. So let's play a game. All right. Let's play a game. It's called Follow the $100. All right. If you guys ever gone to like a pond, you're going to be like, what is he talking about? You ever gone to a pond and taken a rock and thrown it into the pond? Splash. What follows the splash? The ripples. Okay. The ripples. All right. You can take a rock about that big around, throw it 30 feet into a pond, splash, and the ripples will hit every bank on that pond. It'll cause a ripple clear across the pond. One little rock. That's the same thing in monetary policy. If you take $100 and you throw it into the economy, splash, ripples. Okay? Splash, ripples. All right? So let's play a game. Let's follow $100 in the economy. All right? Let's have First National Bank with no loans. They have something called a T account. All right, what do they call a T account? Well, look, it looks like a T. Okay? They have assets on the left, liabilities on the right. They have reserves on the left under assets. This is money in the bank of $100. And they have deposits then of $100. Pardon me, I forgot to write the $100 there. So the deposits come in, they have it in reserves, it's in the bank. Okay? But banks make money giving out loans to people who will pay them back plus interest. So they don't just sit on that $100. So let's redraw First National Bank here. But this time, instead of no loans, they do loans. Okay? Here's their T account. They have assets and liabilities. Let's assume that they have a reserve requirement. Okay? Let's assume that they have a reserve requirement set at 10%. Now, who sets that? The Federal Reserve. That's the reserve ratio. So for every $10 they bring in, they got to keep for every $10 they bring in, they've got to keep $1 in reserve. So every $100 they bring in, they got to keep in $10 in reserve. So they're bringing in $100 in deposits. Okay. They must keep $10 in reserve due to our reserve requirement. That means they can make money on loans by loaning out $90. Now, are banks naturally incentivized to loan out that full $90? You bet, man, because they can get interest on every bit of that. However, if let's say they had 3 people come in for a loan and one maybe qualified for it, but the rest of them didn't, they couldn't loan out the full 90. They could have excess revenues. So a little tip on the homework, there is a problem with excess revenues. So if they're bringing in 100 and they had reserves of, say, 25, their excess revenues would be anything above 10. So if they're bringing in 100, they're required to keep in 10% of reserves for reserve ratio, and they kept in 25, well, they have $15 in excess revenues. You're welcome for that one, by the way. So they bring in 100. Natural tendency is let's be compliant with the monetary policy set by the Fed. Let's keep $10 in reserves. Let's loan out $90 and make money there. That's how they have all that marble, a nice marble in the lobby. Let's follow. Again, the game is follow the $100. So here's the initial deposit of $100. Okay, when we're making loans, we must keep $10 in the vault at First National Bank. We can loan out $90. Now, the economy, I've always told you, it moves like this, right? So what we're going to talk about in this lecture is, let's just assume that we can take little snapshots, little Polaroids, all right? That's a little dangerous in economics, but we're really simplifying things so you can learn how the process essentially works. How does a little stone like this make a ripple that big? Okay? $100 stone in the pond, bloop. Here's your first ripple, if you will. They can make $90 in loans. Let's assume that they take that $90 and they make it to one person who actually banks. So you get a loan here, and I do this. I bank with one bank and I have a mortgage with another bank. It was just whoever gave me the best deal on the thing. So when I got the money for the loan, there was a transfer of money and a deposit made. Let's say this $90 goes to someone banking over here at Second National Bank. And guess what? They have a T account as well. Assets and liabilities. This is the $90 deposit right there. Okay, this got deposited over there, of which Second National Bank is, according to monetary policy, legally required to keep $9 in the vault. That's 10%. 10% of $90 is $9, and they can then loan out the 81. All right, now this is happening in an instant, so it's never this slow. But we're slowing it way down, super slow-mo, okay? Just to illustrate a point here. Little $100 stone into the water, big ripples, okay? Now, if they can loan out that $81, let's still follow the 100. It's down to 81 due to the reserve being 10%, okay? That $81 can then go to Third National Bank. Here it is, $81 in deposits, 810, which is 10%, must be kept in reserves. And then we can loan out $72.90. Let's go to Fourth National Bank, etc., etc. Okay? This gets very complicated. I'm going to put you in the top right-hand corner here. It's my home office, by the way. We can look at this, and point number 5 up here, we're already there. The original deposit was $100. Okay? First National Bank was then able to loan out $90. Second National Bank was then able to loan out $81. Third National Bank was then allowed to loan out $72.90 every time we took out 10%, okay, of what came in and put it in reserves. So the number keeps getting smaller. If you carry this out, it's like 10th, I think it's 11th National Bank before this becomes zero that they can loan out. That's where the ripples end. $100 into the pond, stone, bloop, ripples, okay? These are the ripples. These are the bands of the ripples. Well, where do we get, and again, I think it's 11th National Bank. It might get to 12th. I don't think. I'm pretty sure it's 11th. Before this goes down to zero, and we add them all up. We add them all up, and the total money supply, that'd be the size of the ripple, okay, would be $1,000. So $100 became $1,000 ripple through the economy, all right? This is called the Money Multiplier, okay? The Money Multiplier. All right, let me lower this slightly. So the Money Multiplier depends on the reserve requirement, okay? The Money Multiplier depends on the reserve requirement. Let me turn one thing. I'm trying to get that little glare off of there for you. There we go, a little better, okay? The Money Multiplier with a reserve requirement of 10%. That means for every $10 that comes into the bank, $1 must be held in reserves, or in this example, for the first 100, 10% must be held in, $10 got to be held back. You could express that, or you could express that as written, or R, which is our reserve requirement, 1/10. Okay, so for every $10 that comes in, you have to hold back 1. The same thing as saying 10/100. All right. So there's a shortcut there. if you have to do all of this calculation up here, we all know from math class, if you have to do step-by-step calculation, I just dot, 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 and then I worked it for you, all right? They do it in the reading. But there's always a shortcut if you're clever, all right? So let's be clever, okay? So there's a shortcut. Take the reciprocal of R, and you have your money multiplier, okay? So if your R, in R is like saying, hey, R over 1, right? Okay, if your R over 1 is 1 over 10, okay, your R equals 1 over 10, meaning for every 10 bucks you bring in, $1 has to stay in reserves, okay? Take the reciprocal, your 1 over R, which is your reciprocal, is 10 over 1, which that is 10. I don't know if you can see all the way in that corner. Yes, you can. That is 10. 10 over 1 is 10, all right? That is your money multiplier. You're like, well, okay, great. What does this mean? Well, look at this. Your initial deposit, okay, way over here, all right, was $100. Take your original deposit, all right, of $100 and multiply it by your money multiplier of 10. What is 100 times 10? $1,000. All right, $1,000. You don't need to do this, etc., etc. You don't need to do this. You don't need to do this. You don't need this because they're definitely going to make loans. All you need to know is your original deposit times your money multiplier. You got 1,000, baby. You got 1,000. Your money multiplier, I had to walk you through step by step so you'd understand how the system works. But all you need to know now is money multiplier is take my reserve ratio, take the reciprocal. Okay? So let's think about it a little bit then. I'm going to erase some space here. All right, let's work a couple. What if my reserve requirement, so again, our reserve is 10%. That's like saying 1 out of 10. Our money multiplier then is going to be 10. What if our reserve requirement is 25%? Now let's think about this. 25%, that is the Fed telling a bank they have to hold more in reserve. Did that just lower our lake level? Well, think about it. If there's more money in a vault, that's not money being spent. That's not money being invested. That's not doing this, okay? The Fed has pulled back money from the market. The lake level went down, all right? 25%, that's like saying 1 over 4, your money multiplier is 4. So in this example, all right, in this example, if our original deposit was $100, that's OD, original deposit was $100, then this would be 1,000. $100 times 10, all right? Well, that's the size of our ripple in the economy. That's the one we worked end to end. Well, now you know the money multiplier. Well, you could just say, hey, it's 4. If my original deposit was 100, 100 times 4 is 400. Smaller ripples, because less money's being loaned. Okay, if more money's being held in the vault, less money's being loaned. Let's do another one. Let's R of 50%. So if you bring $100 in the bank must hold back 50% of it. So $50. Well, guess what? That's 1 out of 2. Okay, money multiplier is 2, $200. Much smaller, you know, so it's the same rock going in the pond, but much smaller ripples. Let's say a reserve requirement is 33%. Same thing as saying 1 over 3, right? Okay, money multiplier is 3, $300 worth of money supply, total money supply. That's when we're talking about ripples, the word for that's total money supplied. So just like in life where you can throw a little rock like this in a pond and it'll make huge ripples, all right? The reserves, I guess you could say, determines the size of the rock, all right? Bigger rocks, more ripples. So if you can loan out more money due to the federal monetary policy, you can have a bigger set of impact on the economy. So the money multiplier, you know, it's the concepts are a little convoluted, but really once you come to understand the money multiplier, you got all kinds of shortcuts. All right. So just take that reserve ratio, reciprocal, flip that joker around, and then use that as your money multiplier. All right. You just honestly, the trickiest part is just figuring out the fraction you need to use. Generally speaking, you need some, 1 over something. So try to simplify down to those terms. So I'll try to be honest. I'll give you ones on the homework and on the test that are a little easier, hopefully, to figure out. So T accounts, banking accounts. Let's see what else I got in this chapter. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Hopefully you have found this lecture to be helpful. Let me take a look here. Discount rates. What are discount rates? Did you know banks actually loan to one another? Money multiplier, bank capital. I'm gonna let you read about that. Capital requirements. Man, you want to be rich? Open a bank. Get a lot of red tape though. Discount rates, the interest rate on the loans that the Fed makes to banks. So the Fed is like the kind of, if you look at the structure, the Fed's up here, and then you have all these regional Fed banks, and then you have these big banks, regional big banks, and then you have all the little banks, and it's like an organization chart. All right, it's like a pyramid. Not quite a pyramid scheme. That's more Social Security's specialty, but we have a reserve requirements. We've talked about those. Federal funds rates, the interest rate on which banks make overnight loans to each other. So if loans are coming down that system from the Fed down to other banks, that's called a discount rate. It's discounted so that banks can get a better rate, and then basically gets down to consumers and businesses paying slightly more. Federal funds rate is like if BB&T loan money to Truist, which is now well, no, that's BB&T, and SunTrust is not Truist. So let's say, goodness gracious, there's a lot of integration of the banks here lately. It's hard to say who's loaning money to whom. 2 banks within the same system can loan money to each other, and if they did that, it's called the federal funds rate, is the rate that they charge. That's kind of predetermined by the monetary policy. But let's say Wells Fargo is loaning money to Truist now, or USA is loaning money to Wells Fargo. Banks can loan money back and forth because they can get caught to where, like, hey, our cash reserves aren't there. We got this tremendous opportunity to loan money to the Carolina Panthers to build a new stadium. We need to borrow money from another bank, and they can do that. If they have good credit, they can borrow money at a lower cost, and then charge the Carolina Panthers a higher cost, and boom, they make what's in between. So that's federal funds rate, is when banks loan to one another. Discount rates when the Fed loans to banks. And that's pretty much the chapter. Again, this is way too condensed. There's so many questions in here I could ask on the homework and on the test that just didn't have time to cover in this shorter video. So make sure you're doing the reading. Make sure you watch the much more comprehensive video with my voice over the PowerPoint slides. Till next time, take care.